You're set.
Oh, we're set? Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is sponsored by the ACRL International Perspectives Group. My name is Ray. I'm one of the co-conveners for this group. I'm at Fresno State, and I have the opportunity to travel to Cuba with Nancy and Diana, our speakers today, who will give an in-depth look at the trip and also their experiences. And I want to extend my thanks to Elois and also to ACRL for sponsoring this webinar, and it will be recorded. So if you plan to go to Cuba anytime, this might be helpful, or if you know someone who might be interested in going, the link will be shared and you can share it with them. And I want to extend my thanks to Nancy and Diana for agreeing to speak on this, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I'll be monitoring the chat, and if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type it, and they'll be able to answer it.
Hola. Hello. I'm Nancy Corridan, Coordinator of Multi-Language Collections and Services at WLS, the Westchester Library System in New York. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Diana Lennon, Latino Programs and Services Librarian at the Greenberg Public Library, also in Westchester County, New York. In February of 2016 and 2017, Nancy and I were privileged to take part in the ALA tours to Cuba. In the first trip, we went between President Obama and the Pope, so we felt we were in very good company. In 2016, there were 29 librarians from across the U.S., from academic and public libraries. And here we are in 2017, and there were 27 of us this year, including a librarian from the American Virgin Islands, and of course, Ray. We were pleased that this year we had a direct flight on JetBlue from JFK to Havana, which made it a lot easier to get to Cuba.
Cuba is the largest of the Caribbean islands. Once a colony of Spain and the playground of American high rollers, it gives the appearance of being stuck in time. But it's still a hot topic across many platforms. After more than 50 years of the U.S. embargo, it looks like Cuba's doors are opening up to us. Having said that, Americans can only go to visit Cuba if you're visiting family or for an educational, a cultural, or a religious reason. Last year, 3 million people visited. This year, they think it might be 4 million. And if the embargo is lifted, that figure will rise to 10 million.
The purpose of the trip was to participate in the Havana International Book Fair and to visit Cuban libraries. And over 2 million people participated. However, we encountered 2 obstacles very quickly.
The first obstacle was that we attended the fair with all these people that you see in this picture. Diana and I attend book fairs in Mexico and Spain and here in the U.S., but we've always gone during professional hours. On our repeat visit, it was much of the same. And when I specifically asked for the group to visit during professional hours, they told us there weren't any. You see these tents outside the castle? That's where the book fair was held, and the tents are outside a moat. And there in those tents, they sold books, music, they sold food, soccer jerseys. I mean, it was like a festival, and it was beautiful, but it wasn't easy to navigate.
Yeah. Our second shock was not being able to buy any books. Cuba uses 2 currencies. This is really important to know. They use pesos for the Cubans and what they call convertible pesos, or coups, for the foreigners. In 2016, it was really hard to buy a book. We had to have like a little black market experience to get one book, which was about $1. In 2017, it was easier to buy the books, and because they were accepting the coups that the foreigners used. So we did purchase a few books while we were there.
We quickly learned that the book fair was going to take second standing to visiting the libraries and attending the ASCUBI conference. ASCUBI is the Cuban Association of Librarians.
We visited the Jose Martin National Library, and it's like our Library of Congress. And you can see that they're still using the card catalogs, but they are really not up to date. They're digitizing the card catalog, but they recognize that it will take them a couple more years to get everything done. The staff has some internet connection and some computers, but there are no public computers, and this is in the National Library. In the bottom right of the photo, You can see the second one from the left is Margarita Bellas. She's the current Ascobi president, or ALA equivalent.
At the Ascobi conference, the president of the American Library Association and the president of the Public Association, the Public Library Association, spoke to all of us about the wonderful things that the U.S. libraries are doing, including the American Library Association campaign, Libraries Transform. They explained on how our libraries loan out more than just books. They loan out tablets and telescopes and sewing machines, and I started to feel a little anxious, thinking that we might be coming off as arrogant or boastful to this audience, until a Cuban librarian got up to speak and said that although they don't have internet or they can't offer computers to their patrons, they too want to transform.
Hey, Nancy?
Yes.
Can you explain who Jose Marti is?
Jose Marti was he's the hero of Cuba. He's a nationalist. He was their ruler. He was a poet.
And really a martyr.
An educator, yeah. And he became a martyr for the Cubans for fighting for their civil rights. We visited the Cienfuegos Provincial Library on the southern coast of the island, but the collections were in deplorable condition, as you can see here. They had mold, the covers were falling apart. It was really lamentable.
You can see that this is the interior of the Cienfuegos Provincial Library, and it was really a beautiful building. But we quickly noticed that there were some spots on the wall, and I thought it might be mold, but we found out it was bird poop. And you can see on the window on the right, they have no screen, so the birds fly in and leave their little gift. And it's not like they can run out to Home Depot, you know. So the staff cleans up. And it really showed us that the Cubans' attitude is that you do what you have to do to survive, even if it's cleaning up from the birds.
This is a library record of a little girl in that Cienfuegos library, where the librarian manually enters the Dewey number and the author and the title of the book, and then they staple additional pages to the record, and it's charming, but it's definitely a throwback to the 1950s. So we made connections with librarians as well as library directors. This lady on the left in the topmost picture is the library director of the Cienfuegos Library. Her name is Nefi Castellon. And last year the group gave them ALA posters, which is the poster they're holding. But this year we decided to bring them books and supplies, and they were genuinely overwhelmed by the gesture. And Diana and I hope to form an ALA Sister Alliance program, library to library, with that library.
We also visited this municipal library in Havana, and to the far right, you'll see David Celeb, and he's the director of the Oak Park Public Library. And he's forming a sister library program with this library. And it's taking a while. There's a lot of red tape, as you can imagine. Next to him is Miguel Viciedo. He's the current vice president of ASCUBI, the Cuban Association of Librarians. And Nancy and I had met him at the IFLA conference in Ohio in August of 2016, so it was great to go back and visit again. This library is also the one that the Obamas visited on their trip to Cuba, and this is the bench that Michelle Obama donated along with some trees. And we had a wonderful visit with the library staff there.
We stayed at the Hotel Nacional. Its guests in its heyday in the 1940s and 50s were Frank Sinatra, Johnny Westmuller, Maria Félix, Nat King Cole, Rita Hayworth, American gangsters, and Ernest Hemingway. Tarzan actually swam in that pool. While in Havana, Diana and I attempted to walk in the footsteps of Ernest Hemingway. We visited this historic hotel called Ambos Mundos. Ernest and his second wife, Pauline Pfeiffer, lived here from 1932 to 1939. He wrote both A Farewell to Arms and Islands in the Stream here in that hotel room.
And as a matter of fact, Nancy and I went to the rooftop of this hotel for a mojito, and of course the view was spectacular. And the mojito was too.
Hemingway was seduced by Cuba for its fishing, its island lifestyle, and the Havana night scene. One of the haunts was La Floridita, and we visited here on both our tours. As a matter of fact, in that picture, there's a photo. The photograph is Jack, which is the eldest son of Hemingway, and Spencer Tracy with Hemingway and his fourth wife,
Mary Welsh.
Mary Welsh, right. When Diana and I were there, we chose from 16 different types of daiquiris.
And there's this great statue of Hemingway on the end of the bar, too.
10 miles east of Havana, in San Francisco de Paula, is Lookout Farm, Finca Vigía. Hemingway's house, which the group visited on both trips as well. Martha Gellhorn, Ernest's third wife, grew tired of the small room in ambos mundos, as well as the hustle and bustle of the city. She longed for a place in the country. Now, Ernest was strongly against that because he enjoyed the partying with his friends in Havana. But on one of his long fishing trips, Martha found the house in local ads. She stopped the rental at the hotel and moved all their possessions there. So you can imagine Hemingway's surprise when he returned to find that she had moved him.
Mm-hmm. Another part of Cuba, of the tour, is enjoying drinks at Finca Vigía. And here it looks like there's a Hemingway impersonator following us. And this, of course, is a machine to squeeze the juice out of the sugar cane. You can add the optional rum and lime and pineapple for a very refreshing drink. Originally, the Hemingways rented, as Nancy said, but after Ernest was convinced of the value in living outside of Havana, he bought this house for $12,500 in December of 1940. This is the dining room at Finca Vigía. You can see it remained the same after the Hemingways left Cuba. You can see when you compare the two pictures, it's pretty much the same. No one's allowed to dine there or go in, and you don't actually go into the house to see it. You have to look through the windows, but you still get a really good glimpse of their lives there. On our first trip, we visited a tobacco factory. It was very interesting. It's, of course, an important part of the culture. It's an important crop and export. And we spoke with the workers, and they have a quota of making 110 cigars a day from each person. There's a podium with a microphone at the end of the room, and someone was reading them a detective mystery novel, which they were all enjoying. We also visited the National Literacy Museum, which is based on Fidel's 1961 literacy campaign, where he wanted to teach Cubans in the countryside how to read and write. His goal was to eradicate illiteracy in 1 year. He sent children and young adults to the countryside to teach the campesinos. Many wrote back letters to Fidel to thank him for teaching them to read and write, and those are also on display at the Literacy Museum. And this visit was the only time we felt like there was some government propaganda, but really you have to think about the fact that Cuba has a less than 2% illiteracy rate. It's excellent in Latin America. The education is free in Cuba from nursery school all the way through the PhD, and they export their literacy model to other Latin American countries like Venezuela and Bolivia, especially who are political allies.
But they weren't really able to explain when we asked what did they mean by teaching them to read or write. That was it just their name or one sentence? They were a little bit vague on that. So it was indeed like stepping through a time machine. We often took these cars here into town. They run them like taxis. And while their chassis were from the 1950s, they have modern engines from Japan, from Germany, and Russia. But it's an example of how Cubans make do with what they have. We ate well in quaint restaurants. Some of them are on rooftops, and others are called paladares. And those are family-run restaurants that the family can run given these licenses that they get from the government. Now, our tour guide told us that some of the families run illegal ones to subsidize their income. And this year we encountered a lot more paladares. So we think that maybe it's perhaps a sign that the economy is improving. You hear music on every corner, in the restaurants, on the streets. Even librarians are serenaded with cha-cha and samba rhythms. There they are on the right-hand side being serenaded.
There's a vibrant art scene right now in Cuba. Jose Fuster is a mosaic artist, and he works from his home outside of Havana. He has covered his entire house with mosaics and then went on to cover other houses in the neighborhood. And of course, tourists go there to see this artwork, and his neighbors sell items, and it really is stimulating the economy, really just in that neighborhood through art. We had lunch at his home and visited his gallery, and we were able to buy some of his artwork.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I bought that piece of artwork on the right there, and I framed it. And it's very economical right now to buy artwork from artists in Cuba, so it is a good investment if you decide to do that. It was a whimsical place. The artist is actually there. The man sitting there in the pink shirt, that's Jose Fuster. He's inconspicuously playing chess with a buddy of his. Both tours included a visit to Trinidad. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's the largest concentration of Spanish colonial buildings in Cuba.
It's very beautiful. In the 1800s, there were 48 sugar mills in the San Luis Valley. The railroad arrived there in 1919, but the first road built to connect it by land to the rest of Cuba was not built until 1952. We visited the art studio of Lázaro Niebla in Trinidad. He went out into the countryside and photographed elderly Cubans and interviewed them. And back in his studio, he would carve their likeness in these cedar door panels. So it's a real upcycling for art and reuse, which is very Cuban out of necessity, you know. He had an art show in Minnesota and in Miami in 2016.
The things we came away with is that the Cubans, they're proud of their culture. They hold on to their traditions and their faith and religious beliefs. This is the only temple of Santeria in Havana. It's an African-Cuban religion, a mix of West African, Yoruba, and Catholic beliefs. They have deities called orishas. There's 4,000 in all. And those that practice Santeria really, even though there's this one place, this one temple in Havana, they mostly have the temples in their own house. We found the people to be friendly and sociable. They have a knack for perseverance. They love to dress. And like us, they embrace education, community, and share strong family values. We noticed that there was like a different kind of poverty. It wasn't like going to the DR or the Dominican Republic or Mexico. Salaries, for example, a teacher or a policeman makes about $30 a month. So the big issue there is really about a lack of goods. We brought medicine and well, just basics like Band-Aids and aspirin and everything and supplies to help out a bit. The shelves are full here in this store, but we think this might have been for the tourists because, like I said, that lack of goods is a big issue. There is a subsidized economy. They still have ration books. So with a ration book, a kilo of rice might cost about 5 cents, and when you have a salary of $30 a month, you really need that ration book. So many people are looking to tourism to earn more money, obviously. As a matter of fact, I witnessed this lady in this picture here with a big bag, and in the bag she had smaller bags that had aspirins or toothpaste or toothbrushes, and the people flocked to her because she was giving them away to the public. Even the costume performers surrounded her, which just shows in their lack of amenities. But even with these lack of amenities, Cubans were eager to welcome us. This ice cream vendor here was singing Lady Gaga songs to me once he knew we were from the United States. But I told him I'd rather hear Celia Cruz.
And talking about music, our group this year went to the Buena Vista Social Club, and it's a tribute to the group with some of the, a few original members. It was really great. And our whole trip, in fact, was a good balance of professional visits and cultural activities. So both a lot of fun and professionally rewarding.
Yeah, launched in 1939 is this Tropicana nightclub. My mom actually visited on a troupe from Spain, on an acting troupe in the 1950s. So it was fun for us to go to this. And although this place is strictly for tourists, I think it's important to include the cultural venues on the tours. After all, music and dance have no language barriers.
Our 2 trips to Cuba gave us a glimpse into a country that we've not had communications with for more than 50 years. We were charmed by the people and their make-do attitude.
Let's go back.
Sorry. We learned that their 2 biggest challenges are housing and transportation, as you can see here. The buildings are overcrowded, they're in poor condition. Our tour guide this year noted that about 70% of the buildings should just be knocked down and not even renovated, like it wouldn't even be worth it. So the state of the infrastructure in the cities is really awful, but we did think more buildings were being renovated in Havana in 2017 than the year before. And with the increase in tourists and opening to the U.S., Cuba will have to deal with this very huge problem.
But in spite of their enormous challenges, Diana and I discovered that we had a lot in common with the Cuban librarians. We all want to transform to meet the needs of our communities in spite of lack of amenities. Yes, they have a longer road to travel. They have to build their infrastructure. They also have to deal with the great economic limitations they have, the government restrictions and the lack of access to technology. After Obama's visit and our return to Cuba, our hope is to strengthen the bridge we crossed last year. Cuba is indeed a fascinating country with an eagerness, and Cubans have an eagerness to open their economy to us. We stand to learn a lot from their tenacity of spirit and the ability to adapt and rise above their supply and economic limitations. Seems like Diana and I are caught in Cuba's web of charm. Mm-hmm. But looking forward, we hope to forge an alliance between libraries, between 2 countries, across 90 miles.
Does anyone have any questions?
That's our presentation.
Thank you. Ray, did you have anything you want to add since you were on the trip?
Thanks. This was a great trip. I am trying to sort of go back in time and see what happened, because I know this was just in February of this year, but I felt like I've done a lot since. So I'm trying to recall what happened. But as Nancy and Diana said, I think a lot of us, I think it was just you 2, and was there someone else who went to Cuba before? I can't remember.
No, it was just us 2 on this American Library Association trip. But there is another librarian from Pelham that came on the 2nd trip. Her name is Tricia Perito. She's the director of the Pelham Public Library,
which is near us in Westchester County.
And she enjoyed the trip as well. And we all have different perspectives of it. Yeah. But the most thing I came away with is that the people are so warm and open that you think that maybe they would have some resentment towards us, or they would think we're arrogant and we're show-offs, but it's not like that at all. They're so open and friendly, and they want to work with us.
Yeah,
it's simply that the embargo has to be lifted, but that's always a controversial subject.
Mm-hmm. So we can see some of the questions. Would we do this trip again? I would go in a minute. It's, like I said, professionally rewarding. It was a lot of fun. It's great connections, and we're trying to maintain those connections via email, obviously. One thing we had wanted to do was to bring books and send books to the libraries there, because their collections are horrible. Mm-hmm. Things that we throw out here that you, believe me, you would not want to touch. And because of the embargo, we can't. So anytime anyone we know goes, we want them to bring a suitcase of books, which sometimes works, but that's not the best answer.
There is one thing you have to keep in mind, that since there's very little communication between both our country and Cuba, you have to bring cash. You can't really bring credit cards because there's no credit card accessibility to withdraw money. So you have to just calculate how much cash you're going to bring.
Yeah, actually books are part of the embargo. Information isn't, but they do limit what you can take, like, not that we would take it, but you certainly can't take pornography into Cuba. But of course, going there and speaking with people and delivering information that way is, of course, a great way to do it.
We didn't notice any censorship. We didn't notice any censorship, but I asked librarians, and since both Diana and I speak Spanish, we asked in Spanish whether they can order anything they want. And they did say they could, but I don't know how much of that is 100% true. So at one point, we did have the opportunity to speak to a taxi driver that took us to, he took us, since this was our second tour, we decided to try to go to a beach. The most American or Canadian tours will not include a beach because they're considered entertainment. So we took a cab and we went first to visit a small little library in Havana and then to a beach. And we asked openly this cab driver, how were things and how did he feel about the funeral of Castro? And what he said was very different from what other Cubans were telling us. He said that they were forced to go to the funeral procession and that they had 9 days of looting, what's it called when you were in Lupa? Mourning. Mourning. They had 9 days of being in mourning, and once the 9 days were up, they gave them another 9 days. And he said it's awful. It's not at all what people think, and he was amazed that we would even be interested to see them being so oppressed. Now that took me aback, and I thought, well, it's not that our interest to see people oppressed. We're actually going because we love the idea of visiting a place that was not allowed to us in 50 years and to know what Cubans are about.
So to answer some of the questions too, the books at the book fair were comparable to Lieber and Phil. Nancy and I have been to both, but the variety was a little bit less, and it was just so much harder to navigate, to even find the stands where there were books of interest to us to try to buy. So like I said, there was less variety. They were cheaper. There weren't U.S. prices for certain. And LGBT materials, well, Raul's daughter is the head of, I don't remember the actual name of the government organization, but
Raul Castro's the one in power now.
Yeah, and his daughter heads the LGBT organization or part of the government. And so it's a lot more open now. I don't recall seeing...
I didn't see any books on that subject, but I'm sure there were. There were thousands and thousands of stands inside the fort with millions of books. And the thing that was nice is that families go with their children and they buy books for everyone, since there's no professional hours.
So educational experiences are allowed, and yes, librarians have gone on sabbaticals or trips to Cuba. Someplace to look at it that we didn't actually talk about in the presentation is the Casa de las Americas, and a lot of academic librarians have gone there to do research. I actually am in touch with a UC Berkeley journalism student who went on her own and did some research there and really kind of dug down and got sort of into the underground of the book world a little bit and did her thesis on that. So that it's definitely possible. You know, you have a lot to set up on your own versus going on a tour. So you definitely can go do that, and I think it would be very valuable to do that.
And we found the place to be safe always. We never thought we were in danger in any way, and the Cubans were very, very helpful to us.
I just want to go back to the question about the embargo too. That of course the embargo is from the U.S. We are not allowed to ship books to Cuba, but for whatever reason we can take them in our suitcase. I mean, what's the difference really? And I think we're all on board that, or maybe not all of us on board, that maybe the embargo should be ended. But,
but there's a weight limit on the suitcases right now. Someone asked if the Library Association of Professional Training for the librarians here. Well, there was some talk in the second tour that we were going to actually do a volunteer program with the Cuban librarians, but that didn't come to pass. So perhaps in the future trips, that's possible.
The Cuban Library Association is called a SCUBY.
Oh, a SCUBY.
Can you type it out in the chat, one of you?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. It's just, you can look it up.
C-U-B-I, SCUBY, the Association of Cuban Librarians.
So you can look that up, a SCUBY, Sure.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to just add some of the comments to the questions about the trip again. I don't know if I would do it again personally. I think it was really great, but I can just say that a lot of people had convenience getting there. So if you're coming from New York, there's a direct flight. From LA, there's a direct. And even in the South, like Charlotte, through American Airlines, there's a direct. There's a lot of like good deals. But what I was told that there was a lot of anticipation of travelers going, but actually, from what I heard from my friends who work in the airline industry, there's actually not a lot of people going to Cuba as much, maybe more in Miami, like people down in the South. So Florida, obviously. Yeah, Orlando has direct flights, that's right. So it's really, really interesting because back then, I'm sure Nancy and Diana could say, you would have to go to like Canada or Mexico to get to Cuba.
Right, to go in, sure. Yeah, and that's what people were doing before. They'd fly to Mexico and then go to Cuba to go in, that people from the U.S. Canadians have been able to go all the time. It's just the U.S.
But they want to know if they can go.
Oh,
I think there would be no barring of a Canadian joining the American libraries. Why not? We cross libraries. Why not cross country?
Yeah,
that's our interest.
I mean, that's a question for ALA, but I don't think that would be a problem. Yeah.
And this, I said that it was an educational reason. If you have family there, you can visit. An educational reason, a cultural or a religious reason. But all those three categories fall under 12. It's an umbrella of 12 different things. Mostly it's person to person. And on our first trip, I remember we asked someone that was on the plane, and they were a bunch of bird watchers that were going. So I guess that could be educational or. So there's a lot of, you can go under many, it's about 12 different reasons, but they're all under those three categories.
And actually both of our trips were through Authentic Cuba Travel. You know,
it's a Canadian company.
And they're Canadian,
They were really good.
Authentic Cuba Travel, right?
Yes.
Got it. Oh, same thing, yeah.
Oh, you just type faster than I do, right?
The only thing is they won't take you to places like the beach. That's so silly, but you can do that on your own and with a taxi.
Yeah, that's a U.S. Restriction that U.S. citizens are not allowed to do tourism.
Yeah, they would consider that tourism. And when we went to the beach, we stopped at Bay of Pigs, which was a very interesting area as well. And there was a museum there that's well worth looking into.
Any more questions? Or is anyone out there thinking of going on the ALA trip?
I was going to say, if anyone decides to go, it would be interesting to see the University of Havana and the library there.
Yeah,
did you go?
Definitely.
2006?
What, Ray?
Did you both go last year instead of this year?
No, but we never went to any academic library.
Yeah, we had suggested to ALA that part of the tour include academic libraries, but that did not happen.
And we would have liked to have gone to a medical library as well, being that they're,
you know, they have such a great medical school and doctors.
The only thing they told us about that is yes, that they have free education in medical science, and the hospitals are all free, everything is free, except that the equipment is not the latest equipment. So perhaps that will improve too once their economy is open in a larger way.
Yeah, I see, as a Canadian, I think if you just got in touch with ALA, I don't think that would be an issue at all for you to go on the ALA tour. I really don't.
I think we would welcome that. Why not?
Yeah.
So if there are any other questions, feel free to type it in. I did want to say that for those who are going to ALA Annual, the ACRL International Perspectives, this group particularly, will be sponsoring a program on publishing. So if you're interested in hearing that, just feel free to put it in the chat. But it'll be on the Saturday the 24th, and it'll be at 10:30 a.m. And there's information kind of floating around, but we welcome anybody who'd be interested in joining. So we got another question here. Any Cuban Americans on this trip? I've heard that Cuban is not recognizing U.S. citizenship.
Oh, interesting. I don't think we had any Cuban Americans on the trip. No.
But in some of our talks in the libraries here in Westchester, New York, there are a few Cubans in the audience, and they said they've gone, so they can go. I guess if they have family there, they can go.
On the family reason.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting about Cuba not recognizing U.S. citizenship. I don't know.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are in the mix that are making the decisions, and with the current administration, it's not something that's going to be high on the agenda to lift the embargo, but I think it's well overdue.
Yeah, I think it's been more
clearly,
flexible in terms of
yeah, clearly a lot needs to happen to work on the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba.
Another interesting thing I saw in the libraries there was that in almost all of the public libraries we visited, including the National Library, they have an excellent program and excellent programs and excellent library spaces for people with disabilities. And they partner with schools for the blind and for the hard of hearing, and they do great programs. It was really nice to see how many Braille books they had and how many resources they offered. But one of the librarians that was on the trip asked if they allowed the patrons to take home the material and to hear, let's say, audio books. They do lend out audio books, but they didn't have actual stations that they could hear the audio material there. And that's, I'm sure, all because of lack of funds. But the programs were very large and well encompassing.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Sure, yeah, no, that's a good point too about the you need to travel, but the correct paperwork is critical, of course, the visa and everything. Sure.
But they now do that at the airport. Before we had to get it in advance through the agency that sponsored the tour. But now you could actually get it at the airport, the visa. Yeah. For a cost, I don't know if it was $80 or something like that.
I'm not sure. Yeah. But it was a lot easier the second year going. So I would think by you know, late winter, spring of next year, hopefully it'll be even easier.
Do you want to talk about the safety and the penal system?
Oh, that was well, one thing, people have asked us if we felt safe there, and Ray, I think you'd probably agree, but we felt very safe. We would be wandering at night in Old Havana and kind of lose our way and feel perfectly safe, sometimes more so than in New York City. And our guide told us about the penal system there, that basically it's, if you're caught doing a crime, it's you, a lawyer who's been assigned to you, and the judge. There's no jury. The judge decides guilty or innocent, and you're guilty until proven innocent, and then you are sentenced by the same judge. So is it worth it for a Cuban national to rob us of, you know, some money or something? Probably not, because spending 20 years in a Cuban jail would not be a good option, shall we say.
And they're in horrible conditions, they told us. The only thing we encountered like that was once we were walking around trying to get water, you know, bottled water, and since we speak the language, we're just asking, and we asked these ladies in the street, and they told us, oh, we'll take you, but first we want to show you the best place you can get a mojito. And we were, no, we're not interested in getting a mojito, we really just want to get water. And they took us to like 3 or 4 places, each one saying, this one's great for this, and this one's great for that. And finally, you know, we put our foot down coming from New York, and we said, no, we're really just interested in buying water. And then the lady said, oh, okay, so you can buy it down the block in this supermarket. And we said, thank you. And then they told us, listen, you know, we showed you a couple of nice places. Would you help us? Because, you know, I'm just a student and I have a child and milk is very expensive.
Which it is.
So there were about 4 of us there, and we all pitched in and gave them some money. So they don't outright ask you for money. They try to give you a little tour or help you out in some way, and then they may request some money. But it was really harmless. So I would recommend, if people are interested, to go. It's not only an eye-opening experience because of the differences we see, and it's almost as if time has stood still in Cuba.
Some ways, yeah.
But it was nice to see the differences too, from the city to the country life. I saw when we were going to Cienfuegos, which was in the southern part of the island, I saw a man with a big hog, and he had a leash on him, as though he were a pet. So you see many different things, but the highlight is visiting the librarians and making a connection with them. And there's a lot of red tape, but we're very much interested in starting a sister alliance with one of the libraries there. And we're going to see how David Stelub, which is the director from the Oak Park Library, how he works it out with the library in Havana, and we're going to tailor it after his experience doing that.
There are some U.S.-based libraries that have sister library relationships in Cuba already, one in Maine that we know of. So it depends, I think, on where things are at politically to be able to get through some of that red tape to make that happen.
And I guess the things we've learned from them is their tenacity of spirit. I mean, they just do whatever they can with what they have, and they have great positivity. They just make it work. And it reminds me of my parents' generation and how they did the same. Both my parents are immigrants, and it's just that. If you don't have the amenities, you circumvent and you find the ways to make it happen. So I think we can learn a lot, and I think we're doing that in a lot of the libraries here too, because we have often shortages in budgets and cuts.
Big challenges.
So we have to do with partnerships and with other things. We have to be very savvy about circumventing those things.
Can you both talk about how the script has enhanced your own like work responsibilities at Westchester?
Sure. Well, we've been busy, actually. Besides trying to move forward slowly on a sister library relationship, Nancy and I have been talking about Cuba too. There's just a lot of interest. So we've been going out to the public libraries all over the county to give a similar talk. We also have been talking about Hemingway's Cuba, and you know, there's a lot of interest. People here really want to go to Cuba and find out what it's about and learn about Cuba. So that's been very interesting.
And likewise, there's a lot of hesitation, and there's people in our audiences when we give these talks that are against it, that don't want the embargo to stop. And I think it's the anger. I don't know. I think that it's true that the horrific things happened in the 50s. And they took away people's land. The Fidel took away their land, and they distributed. And I'm sure a lot of people are very angry about that. But if it's an opportunity to open up the communication again, I think we should take advantage of it. And if you can't do it by government, then maybe we can do it by cultural or by professional ways with libraries.
Sure, and hopefully put pressure on each government. But I see Martin is in Miami. I mean, there's the strong Cuban-American community there who has great, you know, political power, and in generally speaking does not want to end the embargo. And, you know, next year, allegedly, Raul will step down. So we'll see what kind of change that brings from that side, too.
They have someone in mind already, but it's not certain. But he happens to be his son-in-law. He happens to be the husband of his daughter. So even though they're not in the family, it's still the same
sort of in the
political
family,
ideas. But we'll see. And they're very optimistic about it, but it's hard to get a clear answer.
Right,
from the people.
Can you talk more about the book fair experience?
Yeah, the book fair experience at first was a little bit of a letdown because it just was so difficult to navigate. It was beautiful and awesome because of the amount of people, the families. I saw ladies with baby carriages in there ducking because it's an old fort, so there's sometimes the corridors you have to duck, and then it would open up to an incredible salon that had Cuban literature, and there were thousands, literally thousands of books and different vendors. But even when we would approach the tables, and we had little time there. That's another thing. I would press, if you go again, to have more time at the vendors, because when I would ask the ladies behind the counter, can you show me your bestsellers, or can you show me what's the most significant books you have here? Often the people that were manning the table weren't familiar with the literature. So that doesn't happen in other book fairs. They are. Now, we did go to some others, and this second time around was much more successful, and they were able to connect us with the hot books and the most popular and the more controversial. So I think maybe because of their opening their doors more, people are giving them feedback to do this. But it's just so hard to navigate. But it is an incredible, overwhelming experience, and you just have to have a game plan, get the map, and go to the specific places you want to go to.
We only had time to really try to focus in on Cuban literature. Obviously, that's why we went, but it was hard even to make our way there through, even it was like a sort of bad map, and we finally found a couple of stands, and then as Nancy said, some of the people knew the books, some didn't. So, we bought some books for sure, but I think I would have liked to have more, So, and then of course there's the money issue, which was better this year for certain, but there were still some stands where we couldn't buy the books.
The other thing is when we go to Spain or in Liber, and when we go to Guadalajara, in Sil book fairs, we have distributors that work from the United States, and they also attend. So we don't have to actually carry the books home. We just choose all the books we want, and the distributor is like the in-between person. So that's really lacking right now. It's starting to happen because Publishers, is it Publishers Weekly? Yeah. Publishers Weekly is beginning to form alliances and partnerships with some of the Cuban booksellers. So maybe they can bridge that gap. So we wouldn't have to worry about the transporting of the book. Right,
and it's still the issue of doing business, company to company, between a U.S. distributor and a Cuban publisher. So,
and they're very inexpensive. The books are like from $1 to $3. The first time we went. The second time we went, we encountered books at $15 and
like $8.
Yes, but they were well worth it. They were, and they're in good quality. It's not that there are a lot of Dominican from the Dominican Republic. The books from the Dominican Republic sometimes are in poor paper, but here no, the books were in good condition. Not a whole lot in color, but we only saw about 4 or 5 different stands. What did you think of it?
Ray, what did you think?
What did you think of the book fair?
I thought it was interesting. I was able to get children's books for my library special collection. Things that you just can't buy on Amazon. You can't just buy any books for. So I thought it was interesting in terms of the exchange rate. I thought it was really worth it, but I will admit, like what you both said, it was pretty hectic. There's just a lot of traffic and not enough maps or directions. And Martin made a good point. He wrote about it is chock full of cultural and literary events. The program is called, I'm going to butcher it, El Cañonazo. Can you?
Cañonazo,
And should be picked up before so that you can navigate the hundreds of events. Yes. So what was it? It was open to the public at times, and then it was open to professionals. So you just have to strategize in advance, but you can't really like get a map to see it. So I thought that was interesting.
And the Cañonazo was where they shoot cannons from the fort. And they do this every single night, and it's filled with tourists, but it's also filled with Cubans because it's a thing to do. It's like a fireworks display. And they go and they talk to their friends. And talk about the Malecón. The Malecón that you see in the background is like an open park for Cubans.
Seawall, like along the coast.
It's that place where you can sit down, and it's amazing. As soon as during the day, it's always busy with people walking around, but at night it becomes like a lounge where people sit down and they have picnics, and there's food vendors that come up and down, and people's boyfriends and girlfriends are there, and you see families, you see people playing music.
And
it's quite a scene.
And the cannon, the beginning of the curfew, absolutely, And the Havana went back and forth between the British and the Spanish and everyone. So, of course, it's a city full of history. That's also very interesting. We had very good tours of the city of Havana.
And some museums.
There's plenty of museums to visit for sure.
Well, thanks, Nancy and Diana. This was a great talk, and for those who are still here, hopefully you'll get a chance to go, and thanks for sharing your comments and questions and experiences. And this webinar will be recorded, and if you have any questions, you can possibly follow up with me if you want to reach out to Diana and Nancy. I don't know if you want to type out your email addresses.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. Hang on.
And as they're typing, I just want to thank everyone again and ACRL for organizing this, and for all of you for attending the webinar.
And be on the lookout for the next trip, which is going to be in 2018. They're thinking actually not to do it during the book fair period, because it's so busy and so difficult to navigate. They're thinking of doing it later on, where there's going to be other book events and other library events, but not necessarily the International Book Fair.
Yeah, and they were talking about doing it later, and then in Cienfuegos, for example, if the tour went there, they would have a smaller, probably more manageable book fair there at that time. So if ALA can work that out so it actually is beneficial, then that's to be seen, though.
And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it looks now, right now, when the doors are opening up, and what it's going to look like 5 years from now. It'll be interesting to see that contrast.
Yeah. Actually, some of the librarians on both trips had been going to Cuba for years, from the University of Illinois and different places. And for them, you know, seeing the changes over the years just was amazing to them. And so hopefully when Nancy and I go back in 10 years, we'll say, oh, yeah, we remember in 2016 and 17 what it was like. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you for attending, everyone. And do send us an email if you have any other questions. We'll be more than happy to help you out.
Sure. And go to Cuba.
Thank you. Well, have a great day.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you, Ray.